Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today, I want to talk about gun control, and I want to talk about the legal aspects of some of the new laws that are being passed in this country, new gun control laws. And I really want to focus on the one in Oregon, Measure 114. I want to talk about what I think the end result of this law is going to be, how it passed, and what's going to happen in the long run. Now, I know a lot of people don't tend to care about gun control in states that they don't live in. But I think as a unified gun community, we should care because it is all part of the freedom tapestry across our country. If people in one state aren't free, well, then nobody's truly free, especially if you ever travel to that state. So those of you that don't know, in the state of Oregon, they passed Measure 114. Now, they only passed it with a 51% vote, and pretty much 51% of the population lives in one county. So it's pretty much the big city enforcing their opinions on the rest of the state. And like I said, even in Oregon, one of the most gun control friendly states right now because of the influence of Bloomberg and his chosen politicians there, the ones he donates lots of money to, they're very pro gun control right now because that's where the money's at. And yet they could still only pass this by a 51% margin, 51 to 49. But this is a pretty sweeping gun control measure. It's pretty restrictive. Just so you know, if you live in the state of Oregon now, you're going to have to go and get permission from the government before you can buy a gun. You're going to have to pay for a training course. You're going to have to get basically a signed certificate from your sheriff or your law enforcement agency locally or your state that says you can go and exercise your Second Amendment rights. They give you permission. That's the most heinous part of the law. They're also, banning magazines that have over 10 rounds, so they're banning standard capacity magazines for most guns. They're making it to where now, even if you have a carry permit, you have to have a completed background check, and there's no time limit on how long it can take to get it done. If they want to put your file in a bin and leave it there for 6 months, they can do it. You can't pick up the gun after 72 hours if they don't do their job like you used to be able to. They call that a loophole, that, after 72 hours, people can just pick up a gun. It's a loophole. No, it's there. It was there for a purpose. That way the government agencies can't stall purchases with no reason. And they've taken away that. Now the government can just deny your purchase just by sitting on their hands if they want to. So these are some pretty egregious gun control measures, as you would expect from Oregon right now. They have really fallen under the sway of big leftist money. But what do I think is going to be the results of these laws? Well, I don't think they're going to stand. The magazine thing is already being sent back by the Supreme Court to lower courts saying this does not withstand constitutional scrutiny, re-rule. In other words, the Supreme Court has said magazine bans, standard capacity magazine bans are unconstitutional because they deny people the right to purchase the stuff they want to purchase. It's the government telling you what you can and can't buy when it comes to a firearm. So do you think a measure that says the government has to give you permission to buy a firearm is going to stand? No, of course not. That is a totally egregious restriction there. That you have to go to the government and say, please, Mr. Government, can I exercise my rights? Could you imagine if they passed a law that said you had to get a certificate from the state after going to sensitivity training before you could exercise your First Amendment rights? The whole country would swarm down on us. But, Second Amendment, that's okay to violate that one in some people's mind, especially the rich Bloombergs, etc. So that is not going to withstand court scrutiny. In fact, a lot of things in this law are already falling, and that is more egregious than the things that are already falling. That is a total violation of someone's Second Amendment rights. That you have to go get permission from the government to exercise your Second Amendment rights, that is not going to stand. And if you don't believe me, listen to some of the people who supported this bill and wrote this bill and got paid to write this bill. Even they say, this will probably not stand in court under the current Supreme Court, which are basically saying, this rogue Supreme Court, it's giving people their rights. This won't stand. But they said, we're making a point. We're telling them what people want, that's what the majority want. Well, one, I think the only point you're making is that you don't value the Constitution because you know it's unconstitutional and you're going to write it anyway. And anyone who says that should be out of office. I hope those millions of dollars you got for your campaign fund were worth it, because you basically just said, we don't care about the Constitution. And I think that should disqualify you from public service, period. Especially if you write unconstitutional bills. I've always said, you write one unconstitutional bill, you're on probation. You write a second one, you should be gone. Writing things that are unconstitutional is not how we govern this country. The Constitution is what you're supposed to consider first. So that's one thing they're saying. As far as the saying what most people want, you got 51% in a very anti-gun area, Portland. You got them on your side. And the only reason they're anti-gun right now is because the left has allowed violence to reign supreme. So everybody's scared of bad guys with guns. And they don't even think about they could be armed and be a good guy with a gun, because that's not what they have shoved down their throats every day. They have, look outside your window. Look at all those crazy people camped out there. They might have guns. We got to stop them from having these. Scare tactics. And here's the thing. Even though you managed to convince 51%, it's still unconstitutional. And the masses are not supposed to rule. That's not the way we govern. It's not, oh, well, whatever 51% think, that's what should be. No, that's why we have a constitution, to prevent the mob from ruling. That's back like if we go back to when interracial marriage was a thing. No state wanted it. All the states, pretty much, when you polled whether interracial marriage should be legal, it was like 90-something% of people said, no, it should not be legal. But because it was constitutional, it happened. Nowadays, nobody would think anything about interracial marriage. But it had to be granted by the Supreme Court due to the Constitution and giving people equal rights. Because the majority of people didn't want it. So if it was just majority rules, we wouldn't have interracial marriage. So majorities shouldn't always rule. Not when they're in contradiction, when they're contradicting the Second Amendment or the Constitution. So if you live in Oregon, yeah, you're going to have to deal with some pretty bad laws for a little while. Maybe not. There might be an injunction placed against it. You don't know. There's going to be lawsuits filed. I'm sure they're being filed today. And I'll let you know anything that I find out, if I find anything out. I'm not really on the inside in Oregon. But you might have to face some bad laws for a little while. But I think you're going to be a testing ground for how quickly these things can be destroyed in court, because this one is very egregious. It's not going to stand legal scrutiny, constitutional scrutiny. And I think any court that it goes to, if they follow the rules set forth recently by the Supreme Court on how to judge Second Amendment cases, this will fall very quickly. All right, everybody. Before I go, I want to remind everyone we are taking up collection for toy guns for tots. In fact, we pretty much hit the $5,000 mark today. That's great. That's a little bit behind where we were last year. We were hitting about $7,000 at this point. But, you know, times are tough. But I want to encourage everyone out there, if you want to participate in toy guns for tots, please do so. Go over to my website, tympistolproject.com. There's a link in the upper corner of this video. You can go over there. There's an explanation of what Toy Guns for Tots is, so that I don't have to tell you now. And there's a place marked there to clearly donate. So please go over and donate if you at all can. Don't feel like, oh, I can't give enough to make it worth it. If everybody watched this video gave $1, we'd be doing really well. So please go over and donate if you can. I'm working on a new logo for it also. So if you're a patron member, go on over to Patreon. I posted some different options there. It's the same logo with some different color schemes. Trying to narrow it in right now. So go over and vote for which one you like, because the logo we have right now is awful. It's just gross. I slapped it together in like 2 minutes one year when we were doing this. So like I said, go over to Patreon and vote on which color scheme for the logo we will use. And if you haven't donated yet, please go over to TYMP Pistol Project and do that. There's a link to both in the upper corner of this video. With that being said, I want to thank everyone for coming today. I do appreciate it. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Until then, I want to remind everyone out there to always carry and stay safe until I see you again. of gun laws in this country. A lot of fuck end result of these things. Fuck. I can't get myself together.